Lilah Forrester stared into the darkness of the ramshackle cabin, tears streaming down her face as the ropes cut into her wrists. She hadn't counted on Jasper Holloway discovering her plan to testify against him, nor had she anticipated being kidnapped from the boarding house in the dead of night. 3 days she'd been here, bound to this rickety chair, with only sporadic visits from Holloway's men bringing water and stale bread to keep her alive until their boss returned to handle her personally. The year was 1878, and Sweetwater Creek, Colorado was supposed to be her fresh start. Lilah had arrived just 6 months prior, a 23-year-old widow with nothing but determination and the skills her father had taught her about bookkeeping. The position at Holloway's saloon had seemed fortunate until she discovered the doctored ledgers hiding his dealings with cattle rustlers and worse. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her heart race. Holloway wasn't due back for another day according to his men. She strained against the ropes again, feeling them bite deeper into her raw skin. The hoofbeats grew louder, then abruptly stopped. A moment of silence followed, then heavy footsteps approached the cabin. Lilah's breath caught in her throat as the footsteps paused outside the door. With a thunderous crash, the door exploded inward, wood splintering around the lock. Silhouetted against the blinding afternoon sunlight stood a tall figure, hat pulled low, a gun in one hand. "You're free," the man said, holstering his weapon and striding toward her. As he knelt before her, Lilah saw his face clearly for the first time. She recognized him immediately as the quiet rancher who occasionally came to town for supplies, Nathan Vance. His dark eyes studied her with concern as he pulled a knife from his boot and began cutting her bonds. "Mr. Vance," she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst. "How did you find me?" "Been tracking Holloway's men for 2 days," he said, his deep voice surprisingly gentle as he worked on the ropes. "Overheard them talking about a woman they were keeping out here. Figured it had to be you, after you disappeared from town." The last rope fell away, and Lilah nearly collapsed as circulation painfully returned to her limbs. Nathan caught her before she hit the floor, his strong arms supporting her. "Easy now," he murmured. "Let's get you some water and out of here before they return." "Why would you risk yourself for me?" Lilah asked as he helped her to her feet. "We've barely spoken 2 words to each other in town." Nathan's expression was unreadable as he studied her. "Maybe that's my mistake. Any decent man would do the same." He guided her outside to where his horse waited, a magnificent chestnut stallion that pawed impatiently at the ground. After helping her drink from his canteen, he looked worriedly at the horizon. "Can you ride?" he asked. Lilah nodded, trying to ignore the pain in her limbs. "I grew up on a farm in Missouri. I can ride." Nathan lifted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness for such a large man, then swung up behind her. "We need to move fast. Holloway's men could return any time." With one arm securely around her waist, he urged the horse into a gallop, heading away from the setting sun toward the mountains in the distance. "My ranch is about 3 hours' ride," he explained as they put distance between themselves and the cabin. "We'll be safe there until we can figure out what to do about Holloway." Lilah leaned back against his solid chest, too exhausted to maintain her usual propriety. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I was going to die in that place." His arm tightened slightly around her. "Not while I'm around, Miss Forrester." The journey to Nathan's ranch was grueling in Lilah's weakened state. Despite the discomfort, she found herself drawing strength from the steady presence of the man behind her. Each time she began to slump with fatigue, his arm would tighten around her waist, his voice murmuring encouragement in her ear. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting a landscape in gold and crimson, Lilah learned more about her rescuer than she had in 6 months of seeing him in town. Nathan Vance had come west after the war, using his savings to build a modest but successful cattle ranch. Unlike many in Sweetwater Creek, he kept to himself not out of unfriendliness, but from a natural reserve and focus on his work. "The townspeople talk about you," Lilah admitted as they rode through a stand of pines. They call you the Ghost Rancher because you appear and disappear so quickly. A rumble of laughter vibrated through his chest against her back. Do they now? And what do you think of that assessment, Miss Forrester? I think people are quick to make judgments about things they don't understand, she replied. I've learned that the hard way.
His voice softened.
I heard about your husband.
I'm sorry.
Lilah stiffened slightly. Her brief marriage to Thomas Forrester had ended with his death from pneumonia barely a year after their wedding. Though she had cared for him, theirs had been a practical union, arranged by her father to secure her future before his own passing.
Thank you, she said simply.
It was some time ago now. They fell into comfortable silence as the trail began to climb into the foothills. Lilah marveled at how easy it felt to be with Nathan, despite the circumstances of their meeting. In town, he had always seemed intimidating with his tall frame and serious expression. Now, she sensed a gentleness beneath his strength that put her at ease. The ranch appeared suddenly as they crested a sturdy two-story house with a large barn and corrals spread out behind it. Lamplight glowed from the windows, and smoke curled from the chimney. Someone's here, Lilah whispered, tensing against him. It's all right, Nathan assured her. That's just Mrs. Gunderson. She comes up from town twice a week to cook and clean. She's trustworthy. As they approached the house, the front door opened, and an older woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a tight bun peered out at them. Mr. Vance. I was beginning to worry. Mrs. Gunderson's words died as she spotted Lilah. Good heavens. Is that Miss Forrester from the Mercantile? She needs help, Mrs. Gunderson, Nathan said as he dismounted and reached up to lift Lilah down. She's been held captive by Holloway and his men. The older woman's face hardened. That villain. Bring her in quickly. I'll heat water for a bath and find some clean clothes. Lilah's legs buckled as Nathan set her down, and without hesitation, he swept her into his arms. Her protests died on her lips as the world swam around her, exhaustion finally claiming its due. Rest now, she heard him murmur as he carried her toward the house. You're safe. When Lilah awoke, sunlight was streaming through unfamiliar curtains. She lay in a comfortable bed, dressed in a nightgown that was several sizes too large for her slender frame. For a moment, panic gripped her until the events of the previous day came rushing back. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. Miss Forrester? Are you awake? Called Mrs. Gunderson's voice. Yes, please come in, Lilah called back, pulling the quilt up to her chin. The older woman entered carrying a tray with steaming porridge, coffee, and fresh bread. Mr. Vance thought you might be hungry when you woke, she explained, setting the tray on a bedside table. You've been asleep nearly 14 hours. 14 hours? Lilah exclaimed, sitting up abruptly. What time is it? Just past 9 in the morning, Mrs. Gunderson replied, pouring coffee into a delicate china cup that seemed at odds with the rustic surroundings. Mr. Vance rode into town at dawn to speak with Sheriff Drummond about what happened to you. Fear clutched at Lilah's heart. He shouldn't have gone alone. Holloway has men everywhere, including some who pay the sheriff to look the other way. Mrs. Gunderson patted her hand reassuringly. Mr. Vance knows how to handle himself, dear. He was quite insistent that you remain here where it's safe. She gestured to a chair where a simple blue dress was laid out. I've brought some clothes that might fit you. They belonged to Mr. Vance's sister when she visited last summer. After Mrs. Gunderson left, Lilah ate ravenously, surprised by her own appetite. The food was simple but delicious, clearly made with care. As she ate, she took in her surroundings. The bedroom was plainly furnished but comfortable, with a writing desk by the window and bookshelves lined with well-worn volumes, poetry, history, and surprisingly, several novels she recognized as favorites of her own. Once dressed, Lilah ventured downstairs to find Mrs. Gunderson in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with practiced efficiency. There you are, the older woman exclaimed. Feeling better? Much. Thank you, Lilah replied, smoothing the blue dress, which fit reasonably well despite being slightly loose in the waist. Is there anything I can do to help while we wait for Mr. Vance to return? Mrs. Gunderson smiled. Such a dear girl. You should be resting after your ordeal, but if you insist, you could help me snap these beans for supper.
As they worked side by side, Mrs.
Gunderson shared stories about Nathan that painted a picture of a man far different from his taciturn public persona. He read poetry by the fire in the evenings. He had personally built much of the furniture in the house. He never failed to send Mrs. Gunderson home with extra supplies for her grandchildren. Why does he keep to himself so much? Lilah asked as she dropped beans into a pot of water. Mrs. Gunderson's hands stilled momentarily. The war changed him, as it did many men. He doesn't speak of it, but I gather he saw terrible things. When he came west, I think he was looking for peace as much as opportunity. Before Lilah could respond, the sound of hoofbeats approached the house. Both women hurried to the window to see Nathan dismounting from his horse, his expression grim. Another rider accompanied him, a young man Lilah recognized as Deputy Marshal Tyler Johnson. Nathan entered the kitchen, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. His eyes immediately found Lilah, relief washing over his features when he saw her standing. "Miss Forrester," he said with a nod. "I'm glad to see you up and about." "What happened in town?" she asked, unable to contain her anxiety. Nathan exchanged a look with Deputy Johnson, who had followed him inside. "Holloway knows you're missing," he said bluntly. "His men are searching everywhere. The sheriff claims there's nothing he can do without evidence of wrongdoing. Which is why I'm here," Johnson added, stepping forward. "Nathan, Mr. Vance came to me instead of relying on Sheriff Drummond. I've had suspicions about Holloway for months, but couldn't get anyone to talk." Lilah's hands trembled slightly. "I have evidence. The ledgers at the saloon, I made copies of the pages showing his transactions with the rustlers. They're hidden in my room at the boarding house." Johnson's eyes widened. "That could be enough to bring him down if we can get to them." "It's too dangerous," Nathan cut in firmly. "Holloway's men will be watching the boarding house." "Then what do you suggest?" Lilah challenged, lifting her chin. "I didn't risk my life obtaining that evidence to simply hide away while Holloway continues terrorizing the territory." Nathan studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, his stern expression softened into something that might have been admiration. "Mrs. Gunderson," he said, turning to the housekeeper, "would you be willing to visit town tomorrow to collect Miss Forrester's things? You could claim she's fallen ill and is staying with your cousin." The older woman nodded firmly. "Of course. No one would question an old woman like me. I'll provide a description of where to find the ledger copies," Lilah added. "They're sewn into the lining of my gray shawl." Deputy Johnson looked between them. "Once we have the evidence, I can wire for the federal marshal. With proof of Holloway's dealings with rustlers across state lines, we can bypass the local sheriff entirely." As they finalized their plans, Lilah couldn't help noticing how Nathan positioned himself protectively near her, his gaze frequently returning to her face, as if reassuring himself of her well-being. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them, a connection that made her breath catch and her cheeks warm. Later that evening, after Mrs. Gunderson had departed for her home in town and Deputy Johnson had left to make arrangements, Lilah found herself alone with Nathan on the front porch. The sun was setting over the distant mountains, painting the landscape in fiery hues that reminded her of his determination when he'd kicked down that cabin door. "Thank you," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Not just for rescuing me, but for believing me when others wouldn't." Nathan turned to look at her, the dying sunlight catching in his dark hair. "You're a woman of remarkable courage, Miss Forrester. Standing up to Holloway when everyone else in town is too afraid to speak against him." "Please call me Lilah," she offered. "After everything that's happened, formality seems unnecessary." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Lilah, then. And I'm Nathan." "How did you know I was missing?" she asked, the question that had been lingering since her rescue. Nathan leaned against the porch railing, his gaze distant. "I notice things. People. You, especially." A faint flush colored his tanned cheeks. "You have a routine: the mercantile in the mornings, the boarding house for lunch, back to work until sundown. When you didn't appear for 2 days, I knew something was wrong." Lilah stared at him, surprised. "You noticed my routine?" His eyes met hers, vulnerable yet steady. "I notice everything about you, Lilah. Have since the day you arrived in Sweetwater Creek." The admission hung between them, honest and unexpected. Lilah felt her heart quicken as she realized the quiet rancher had been watching over her from afar all these months. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't need to say anything," Nathan replied gently. "I'm not expecting anything. I just want you to be safe." As darkness fell around them, Lilah found herself drawing closer to him, seeking his steadying presence. When he hesitantly offered his arm, she took it, allowing herself to be guided back inside to the warmth and light of his home. The next morning brought tense anticipation as they waited for Mrs. Gunderson's return from town. Nathan busied himself with ranch chores, while Lilah helped around the house, finding unexpected comfort in the domestic tasks. By mid-afternoon, they had fallen into an easy rhythm together, as if they'd been sharing the same space for years rather than hours. When Mrs. Gunderson finally arrived, her expression was grave as she handed Lilah a small bundle of belongings. "Holloway's men were watching the boarding house," she reported, sinking into a kitchen chair. "I managed to get your things, including the shawl, but they questioned me closely about where you might be." "Did they follow you?" Nathan asked sharply. "I don't think so," Mrs. Gunderson replied. "I visited several other places in town afterward to throw them off, including my cousin's house where I claimed you were staying." Lilah carefully unpicked the stitching on her shawl, revealing several folded papers hidden in the lining. "Here they are," she said triumphantly, spreading the copied ledger pages on the table. Dates, names, amounts, everything showing Holloway's connections to rustling operations in 3 territories. Nathan examined the papers, his expression darkening. "This is worse than I thought. He's not just working with rustlers, he's organizing them." "Deputy Johnson needs to see these immediately," Lilah insisted. "I'll ride into town at nightfall," Nathan decided. "It's too dangerous for you to leave the ranch." Lilah started to protest, but was interrupted by the distant sound of approaching riders, multiple horses moving at speed toward the ranch. Nathan moved to the window, his hand dropping to the revolver at his hip. 5 riders, he reported grimly. "Holloway's men." Mrs. Gunderson gasped. "They must have followed me after all." "Oh, dear Lord. I've led them straight to you." "It's not your fault," Nathan assured her, already moving toward his rifle mounted above the fireplace. "Lilah, take the evidence and hide in the root cellar. Mrs. Gunderson will show you." "What about you?" Lilah asked, gathering the papers with trembling hands. Nathan's expression was determined as he checked his weapons. "I'll convince them you're not here." "They won't believe you," Lilah argued. "They'll tear this place apart looking for me." "I won't let them get that far," he replied with quiet confidence. "Now go, please." Mrs. Gunderson pulled Lilah toward the kitchen and a trapdoor hidden beneath a rug. As they descended into the cool darkness of the root cellar, Lilah heard the front door open and Nathan's voice calling out to the approaching riders. Minutes stretched like hours as Lilah huddled in the cellar with Mrs. Gunderson, straining to hear what was happening above. Muffled voices grew louder, more aggressive. A crash, followed by the unmistakable sound of a gunshot, made both women flinch. "I can't stay down here while he faces them alone," Lilah whispered, rising from her crouch. Mrs. Gunderson clutched her arm. "Child, what can you possibly do against armed men?" Lilah's eyes had adjusted enough to see the older woman's frightened expression. I don't know, but I can't hide while Nathan risks his life for me. Before Mrs. Gunderson could stop her, Lilah climbed the ladder and pushed the trapdoor open a crack. Through the narrow opening, she could see into the kitchen, where Nathan stood with his back to the stove, rifle aimed at the doorway to the main room. "I told you, she's not here," Nathan was saying, his voice deadly calm. "Now get off my property, before this gets worse for you." "Holloway says different," came a drawling reply. "Says the old woman was seen leaving the boarding house with her things. Says you've been asking questions all over town." "Then Holloway's mistaken," Nathan replied. "Wouldn't be the first time." Lilah couldn't see the other men, but she could sense the tension building. Making a split-second decision, she pushed the trapdoor fully open and emerged from the cellar, ignoring Mrs. Gunderson's frantic whispered pleas. "Nathan," she called softly. He didn't turn, but his shoulders stiffened. "Get back down there," he ordered, voice barely audible. Instead, Lilah moved to the kitchen counter, where she could see a shotgun propped against the wall. As she reached for it, one of Holloway's men appeared in the doorway behind Nathan. Well, the man sneered, catching sight of Lilah. "Look what we found." Everything happened in a blur. Nathan spun, firing his rifle at the man in the doorway. More shots rang out from the main room. Lilah grabbed the shotgun, struggling with its unfamiliar weight as two more men pushed into the kitchen. A deafening roar filled the small space as Lilah fired the shotgun, more by instinct than aim. One of the intruders cried out, clutching his shoulder as he stumbled backward. Nathan had already dispatched the first man and was grappling with another. The commotion was suddenly interrupted by authoritative shouts from outside. "U.S. Marshal, throw down your weapons." The fighting froze as Deputy Johnson burst through the front door, accompanied by 3 armed men wearing badges. Holloway's remaining men, finding themselves outgunned, slowly raised their hands. As Johnson and his men secured the intruders, Nathan crossed the kitchen in 3 long strides and pulled Lilah into his arms, the shotgun trapped awkwardly between them. "I told you to stay hidden," he admonished, but his voice was thick with relief rather than anger. "I couldn't let you face them alone," she replied, looking up at him. Johnson approached them, holstering his weapon. "Fortunate timing," he remarked with a slight smile. "I decided to bring the federal marshals directly here rather than wait for you to come to town." Later, after the wounded had been tended to and Holloway's men taken into custody, Johnson examined the evidence Lilah had preserved. "This is more than enough," he confirmed. "The marshals are already preparing to arrest Holloway tonight. With these men's testimony, he'll hang for sure." Relief washed over Lilah, but it was quickly replaced by uncertainty as she realized her ordeal was ending. Soon, there would be no reason for her to remain at Nathan's ranch, under his protection. As if sensing her thoughts, Nathan approached her after the marshals departed, leaving them alone in the now quiet house. "What will you do now?" he asked hesitantly. "Will you return to town?" Lilah considered the question. "I'm not sure. My position at the Mercantile is likely gone. I could move on to another town, I suppose." Nathan's expression tightened at her words. "Or you could stay," he said quietly.
"Here.
"With me." Lilah's heart skipped. "What are you suggesting, Nathan?" He took her hands in his touch gentle despite the calluses from years of ranch work. "I'm not good with words, Lilah. I've lived alone so long, I've almost forgotten how to express what I feel." He took a deep breath. "But these past days with you here, it's like color returned to a world that had faded to gray. I don't want to lose that." "I don't want to lose you. We barely know each other," Lilah protested weakly, even as her heart raced at his words. A smile tugged at his lips. "Don't we? I've watched you. For months, your kindness to everyone in town, your determination, your quiet strength. And you've seen sides of me that no one else has." His grip on her hands tightened slightly. "I'm not asking for promises right now. Just stay." Give us time to discover if what I feel, what I hope you might feel too, can grow into something lasting. Lilah looked up into his earnest face, remembering how he had crashed through that cabin door without hesitation, risking his life for a woman he barely knew. How natural it had felt to work alongside him these past days, to share meals and conversation. How safe she felt in his presence. "Yes," she whispered, her decision crystallizing. "I'll stay." Joy bloomed across Nathan's usually serious features. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise. Spring turned to summer, and summer to fall as Lilah and Nathan's connection deepened. With Holloway awaiting trial in Denver, Sweetwater Creek began to flourish under new leadership. Nathan emerged from his self-imposed isolation to become a respected voice in town affairs, while Lilah used her bookkeeping skills to open a small office helping local businesses manage their accounts. They were married on a crisp October day, with golden leaves swirling around them as they exchanged vows before friends and neighbors on the porch, where they had first acknowledged their feelings. Mrs. Gunderson wept openly, declaring she'd never seen a more perfect match in all her years. As they settled into married life, their love grew stronger with each passing day. Nathan's nightmares from the war faded in the comfort of Lilah's embrace, while she found healing from her past losses in the home they built together. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, and within a year, the sound of a baby's laughter joined the household. On the anniversary of her rescue, Nathan found Lilah standing on the porch, gazing at the sunset. Their infant daughter slept peacefully in her arms, a perfect blend of her mother's delicate features and her father's dark hair. "What are you thinking about?" Nathan asked, wrapping his arms around both his wife and child. Lilah leaned back against his chest, a position that had become as natural as breathing. "I was thinking about that cabin, strangely enough. How something so terrible led to something so beautiful." Nathan pressed a kiss to her temple. "When I kicked down that door and said you were free, I had no idea I was freeing my own heart as well." Lilah turned in his arms to face him, their daughter nestled between them. "I love you, Nathan Vance. My cowboy, my rescuer, my heart." "And I love you, Lilah Vance," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Today, tomorrow, and for all the days we have left." As the sun disappeared behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the land they now shared, they stood together, a family forged in adversity but built on love, as enduring as the western landscape that surrounded them.